Here are the 5 steps to correctly set a fundraising goal at your nonprofit. Step number 1. All you have to do is determine how much money you need for the thing. This could be a program, it could be a new building, it doesn't really matter. But step 1 is, how much do you need? And I know that sounds overly simplified, like, oh, I would love to set a goal of just what I need. But as a general rule, just to start out of nowhere, we have to have some level of determination of where we begin. Like 100,000 versus a million versus 50 million, very different numbers, and steps 2 through 5 can only dial you in so much. So you start off with, what am I raising money for? If you don't have the answer to that question, you probably should back up and answer that question first. So we always go need-based fundraising first when we can, because it rallies people around a specific cause, a specific deadline. Even if you're not in campaign mode, really does help to have a before, during, and after, some sort of end product to demonstrate, yes, we raised this money and we spent it on this thing, and then that had some kind of impact on people or the world or children or animals or whatever your mission is. So how much money do you need? Let's say, for example, you're a school and you need to build a new library. Just to make the math easy, let's say that new library building cost $3 million. Not necessarily our final fundraising goal, but we're gonna start with saying $3 million is the number we're going to base step 1 on. If we could raise every dollar we could, fund the whole thing, that's where we're gonna begin. Number 2 is to know how close you can get to that number is, what is your fundraising history? Ask yourself, what if you raised in the past? How old is your program? Whether you're a brand new school or you're a school that's been around for 50 years and have a ton of alumni, very different situation going into that initial project. Obviously, if you have a lot of brand equity within the people who support you and you have a long program history of raising lots of money for a very long time, that's obviously going to be much, much easier than convincing a brand new group of people who have never heard of your nonprofit to give for the first time. So look at your history. So say, in step 1, we determined we needed $3 million. That's kind of our dream goal. We want to start there. But what if we only raise about $300,000 a year, $300K a year, and our fundraising project is going to last 3 years. So that means not less than $1 million if we ran it for 3 years. It's like, okay, well now 3 million is looking a little bit tougher. We don't necessarily know if we can triple our income. So maybe we drop that goal down a little bit for now. Again, we can get in step 3 through 5, we can get into some more of this, but let's drop that goal down a little bit, saying if we just raised and kept doing what we're doing for 3 years, we'd have a little under $1 million. Let's say that we can double it. We'll be very ambitious and say now it's $2 million. $2 million is the new number, which is going to be a roughly double boost in fundraising revenue. That may seem like a lot. On average, charities inside of a campaign or a project mode are going to raise anywhere from 6 to 10 times what they would outside of it. That number can be skewed a little bit because there are fundraising programs that are pretty well optimized already, and because they're so well optimized, they don't have a lot of ceiling to go. Say they do a lot of major gift stuff already. Your total increase may be not very much. Maybe you can double, maybe you can triple in campaign mode. But if you're an organization who focuses on grants and fundraising events, then there's a lot of ceiling for you. You have a lot of potential within major gifts where maybe you can go 6 to 10 times the amount you're raising right now because you don't have an excuse or a reason to talk to big funders, apply for bigger grants, go to corporations for larger gifts because you don't have a specific thing to rally around. But now you do. You're in project mode. You're trying to, again, in this example, we're going to build a library attached to our school. Though if we just kept going where we're going, 1 million, we're going to push that to 2 million. That's step 2. All right. Step number 3 is to look at how many top, and we'll put that in quotes, top prospects do you have? As you can tell, my handwriting is quite good. It's my best skill set besides fundraising, obviously. Major gifts are going to be the single determining factor of campaign success or failure. We preach this all the time. You've probably heard about it in the industry. We know that anywhere from 80 to 95% of campaign totals come from major gifts. 80 to 95% of all money given away in the US is from individuals in that top 1% or top 2% income bracket. So obviously very, very important to do that. But you want to look at how many prospects you have at each level. Here's what I mean by that. Say you want to raise $2 million. So in that $2 million, we can say roughly 80 to 90% of that's going to come from major gifts. So we'll say like 1.8 million just from major gifts. That's a soft average. If you look at average campaigns across the country, you're going to get almost the entirety of your revenue from those top funders, maybe 20, 25 people at most. The way that would break down is maybe you have one gift at $500,000. So you got a 500K, 200K, or we'll say 250K, 100K, 50K. So at each of these 4 levels, say you need 1 of these gifts, and then 2 of these gifts, and then we'll say 5 of these gifts, and then 10 of these gifts. So 1 $500,000, 2 at $250,000, 5 at 100,000, and 10 at 50,000. That would be a pretty appropriate distribution for top gifts if you're looking to raise $2 million total. If you add all that up, that's $500,000 plus another $500,000, so that's $1 million, plus another $500,000, which gets you to 1.5, and then there's another $500,000 there. That's maybe too much. Let's adjust this. Let's say we'll get 5, or 6. 6 gets us to 1.8 million. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 8, 14 gifts that get you to 1.8 million. These are very critical. These gifts that you get right here, these 1, 2, 5, and 6 gifts at each of these gifts levels to reach that $2 million goal are absolutely essential to do. So we need to see, do we have prospects who are actually qualified at each of this level? Can you name someone within your prospect base or your donor base who could get $500,000? Do you have more than one? How many do you have? The magic ratio that we use in the industry is that every time you get an ask, especially at the top level, you're probably going to get a yes a third of the time, a maybe or a not right now a third of the time, and a no a third of the time. So we just kind of build that into the math. So we say, okay, our ratio is 1 to 3. That's our ratio of gifts, of how many asks we have to make to actually get that gift. So for the $500,000, we need 3 prospects. And then for the 250,000, we need 6 prospects. For the 100,000, we need 15 prospects. And then for the 50K, we need 18 prospects. So these are kind of your magic numbers here. Do you have in your network people at each of these levels who could give at each of these levels, given that everything else is properly optimized? You, in theory, should get roughly a third. Maybe you do a little better than that. Hopefully, if you're a client of Pride, you know how to ask correctly. Maybe you do a little better than a third. But you want about a third of these. So if you have 3, 6, 15, and 18 at each of these giving prospect levels, you're very likely to be successful. So if the answer is yes, I do, then you proceed forward with 2 million. If the answer is no, I do not, we might want to drop that goal further. So let's say in this case, we have exactly this amount. It will never happen perfectly like this, but let's say, for argument's sake, we have exactly 3, 6, 15, and 18 prospects at each of these levels. So we're saying, yes, the $2 million number does in fact work. We are confident because that's not even including all of our $25,000, $10,000, everything below to get our last $200,000 that we have to raise over the course of those 3 years to reach that $2 million number. Hey, thanks for checking out our video. If you're ready to level up your fundraising program, Pride Philanthropy might be able to help. Our team helps raise over $100 million per year for dozens of clients all over the country. We train staff and volunteers, conduct feasibility studies, and manage multi-year campaigns. If you're looking for outside help to kickstart your program or rejuvenate your efforts, you can book a free 30-minute call with one of our experts to see if you qualify as a client of Pride. Visit pridephilanthropy.com or click the link below, and we'll see you over there. Okay, now, we've decided that 2 million is relatively feasible. It covers roughly a third of the costs that we need for the total project. And now we can move on to step 4 of 5, which is to review the other key factors that influence success or failure. So we want to hedge our bets and increase our batting average or increase the percentage, the likelihood that we're going to succeed if we adopt that $2 million goal. Because again, if you set that goal too high, even if you raise a bunch of money, people feel like you fail. And if you set it too low, you can't ask for gifts large enough to actually do the thing, build the $3 million library or whatever you're trying to do. So here are some questions you should ask yourself. What are other key factors? Number 1, reputation. What is your reputation in the community? If you are known as being one of the top charities in town and everybody knows what you do and are really excited about the mission that you have and the people that you serve, that's probably going to help you a lot. A lot of national brands get a lot of help in this area. Like, you can think of an example like the United Way, Red Cross, the Humane Society, a Boys and Girls Club. These are local charities, technically, but because they have the brand equity of a national brand, their reputation in town is pretty good already. So they can check that box. Maybe the reputation allows you to increase 10%, 15% in that goal. So you could raise 2.2 million or 2.1 million. If your reputation is either bad or non-existent, both are roughly the same problem. You either have to correct people's perceptions of you, or you have to go through and just create perceptions in the first place and use kind of word of mouth to bring your organization's name and mission and the things that you do to the community. It can bring it down a little bit too. Maybe you drop it by 10 or 15% depending on the reputation. The second question is average campaign in your community. If your community is a small town and the most that any charity has ever raised in the last decade is 1.5 million, this might be a big deal. It's a big stretch, but if you're in a more metropolitan market where people are used to giving to the local college or the museum or the private school or a church where they're building these 5, 10, 15, or $20 million projects, these larger projects, your $2 million campaign might even be too small. It might not get the right attention that you need to actually get the thing off the ground. So we can say, in that case, if the average campaign is a $5 million project or a $10 million project in your city, it is totally fine and appropriate to then increase by a little bit. Say, you know what? We're going to have a stretch goal of 3 million. We're going to go back to 3 million because all we would need is one singular $1 million gift on top of what we already determined that we do have. And that would get us from that 2 million to the $3 million number. So the top gift really determines the overall scale. And if you have a whole bunch of campaigns in town that are in that multi 7-figure or even 8-figure range, adding a little bit of extra onto your campaign might be a good idea. Last question to ask yourself: do your board and leadership buy into the goal? Do they endorse the goal? If your top of organization are not excited about the project and they don't feel like the goal is possible, whether overtly by saying that either on purpose or accidentally in the community, or even subconsciously in the way that they act, the way they recruit, the way that they talk about the campaign, the way they fundraise, if they're not totally bought in, you really will have to take a lot off the top of that goal. So say again, we're at $2 million, just for argument's sake. Let's say we did not find the $3 million donor. It's a totally fine size of campaign at $2 million for our community, and that's what we want to raise. The board is super bought in, leadership super excited. They've all decided that they're going to give. Great. Maybe we say that's fine, and we start at 2 million, or we could even go to 2.25 or something. We can increase it. Like, we got super bought in board members, super bought in leadership, our executive director, CEO, they're plugged into the community. Maybe we push that a little bit. If it is the case where they are not bought in, it's going to be an uphill battle the whole way. And do we even do a campaign? Well, I would hope so. You're going to raise more money regardless, so maybe we drop it to 1.5 in that case. If you can't do it, you drop it to 1.5. So once you've kind of asked a couple of these questions, just kind of play with the goal a little bit, push it up, push it down, and see if these factors are going to affect where your final goal actually ends up. All right, step 5, the final step. Before announcing your goal publicly, you have a ton of leeway to know pretty well for sure if you're actually going to achieve it. Here's how you do that. Before you announce, you're going to raise anywhere from 30 to 50% of that total, and then launch your public campaign. Many of you might be familiar with this. This is called the quiet phase. It's not a secret phase, because some people call it the silent phase. We think that's a little bit too in the shadows. We say it's the quiet phase because we're not necessarily hiding the fact that we're in campaign mode. We're just not announcing the goal publicly. We may talk about it a little bit within our inner circle, but most of the work that we're doing during this quiet phase, before we announce, before we declare our goal and finalize it, is to talk to our major donors. That list of 5 and 8 and 16 that we talked about earlier. Go and talk to those folks. Get the yeses, get the nos, get the maybes, and figure out where you are. Say you're going for the $2 million goal and you go through the quiet phase and you talk to your inner circle, your board, your lifetime givers, the people who you know you're going to get funding from, the people who you have easy access to, and you end up with $700,000, 700K. So that's a little more than a third. If that's the case, probably feels like that $2 million number is about right. You know, you just surpassed that 30% number. You can go ahead and safely launch at that point, and 2 million probably was right all along. So you just have these kind of factors that kind of lead you all the way there. If you, instead of the 700K, say you really smash it and you go above 50% of the goal. Oh, we raised 1.5 million. We went all the way up to 1.5 million just within that first 6 months to a year, not doing any campaign marketing, not any kind of outreach, just talking to our inner circle and having these private one-on-one conversations with our lead gift donors. Then that 2 million was probably too small. If we get to 1.5K without doing that, great. Now, before we've announced our overall goal, we're saying, great, now we're gonna raise all 3 million. We have evidence to support that there are plenty of people who can give at this level, and because we're at 1.5 million and we're not even a third of the way done, or maybe we're right at a third of the way done from the time scale perspective, as soon as we do the public phase or the public launch of the campaign, we're very confident at this point, based on all the factors, that we can actually hit 3 million. So that's the 5-step process. The good news is it's all just increasingly accurate guesswork until you get to the end. But before you announce, you're actually able to go out and do a ton of the fundraising itself to get you your final data, your final supporting evidence of what is true, what is correct. So at each turn, at each of these 5 steps, you dial in a little bit more information, Maybe one pushes you up, maybe the next one pushes you down. All of these are factors that kind of go into the overall goal. But we want to nail the goal. Again, too high, too low, both huge problems, but you don't have to decide it all at once. You can kind of go through these steps one at a time, use them to continually dial in and continually refine, launch your campaign without being entirely sure of the goal, and then once you hit that 30 to 50% mark, depending on how long it takes you, then you can determine what your goal is, launch publicly, and hopefully raise a bunch of money. Does your nonprofit need a more customized solution to reach its fundraising goals? You can get more information on how we might be able to help by going to pridephilanthropy.com or clicking the link in the video description.